The younger the children you have that you're caring for, the more the judge may use that against you. So if you have like a newborn baby who weighs, maybe not a newborn, but let's say, not almost a toddler age, let's call it 2 years old, weighs 20 pounds. Okay. But you're testifying you can only lift 10. The judge is going to, well, how do you lift your baby? So it's kind of creating that expectation for folks who go back to work. Now, there are exceptions like the unsuccessful work attempt, which we could do a whole podcast on, and I don't want to deep dive into it. But generally speaking, you need to be out of work for 12 months or more, or expect to be out of work for 12 months or more. And so, like you said, you don't actually have to be out of work for 12 months before you apply, but in your head, you expect to be out of work for 12 months or more. That's right. What is the number 3 thing that you see as ways that kind of people or clients kind of screw up their case?
Yeah, this is one that that's a big one is drug or alcohol abuse. We know that Social Security's rules regarding drug and alcohol abuse is that if it exacerbates your severe impairments, that is grounds for your case to be denied. Now, if your severe impairments are not related to drug and alcohol abuse, the law says that in and of itself, the drug and alcohol abuse cannot be used to deny you. But we also know that Social Security decision makers are people, and they may see themselves as shepherds of the public trust, of the public funds. So the presence of drug and alcohol abuse can bias a Social Security judge, even if it's not related to your severe impairments. There's this feeling of like, well, I don't want my tax dollars or my neighbor's tax dollars or our collective Social Security tax dollars to going to someone who I know, based on the medical records, is going to spend a significant portion of that income on drugs and alcohol. So sobriety is something that we strongly encourage, especially if the case is if the case is impacted by your drug and alcohol abuse. If your severe impairments are, if your doctors are saying you have a problem with your liver and you need to stop drinking, if you continue to drink, your disability case in all likelihood will be denied. But even if your impairments aren't related to it, it just helps to have sobriety, and so that we don't have to run into the bias, the reasonable bias of Social Security decision makers when they see drug abuse, alcohol abuse, or both in a case.
Yeah, I think it sometimes will be used against a claimant's credibility and kind of what you're talking about. This is what I'll say about drugs and alcohol abuse. I think the most popular cases or the type of impairments that DNA is kind of the term that Social Security uses, drugs and or alcohol, is because you hit the nail on the head. Is it having a substantial impact on their severe impairment? They're going to default to yes, if it's anywhere related. So, for example, mental health cases are by far the number one types of cases where DNA will be used to deny the person. So if you're depressed and you're drinking or considered an alcoholic in your records, medical records, that will be used against you and likely be denied. Marijuana is not legal at a federal level. It may be legal in your state, but you have to remember that Social Security is a federal program and follows federal law. So, a lot of judges these days, though, at least the more, moderate to kind judges will use marijuana to hammer against you unless it has that impact, right? So, and I don't want to argue about the, benefits and, side effects of marijuana because but if a judge believes that marijuana can induce anxiety or depression based off of whatever study, they will use that against someone who's has anxiety or depression, schizophrenia, PTSD, personality disorder, any of those mental health symptoms where there's DANA involved. It is a really tough case to win, really tough. And like you said, in a physical case, I think that the more popular diagnoses where they'll use DANA to deny a person is things like seizure disorder, right? Because if it's an alcohol-induced seizure versus like, hey, I have seizures, and they can't even tell the difference, they're going to deny you, right? If it is liver disease and you can stop and things, maybe get better, they're going to deny you. Or, just think about the side effects, the negative side effects of using drugs and or alcohol. And does that have a direct impact on whatever your impairment may be? Now, as you and I both know, it's not just drugs and alcohol, right? It also can be things like smoking, which is legal everywhere. So, but Social Security, if you're claiming asthma or COPD, yet you're still smoking a pack a day or a half a pack a day, they can use that against you because you are causing yourself to get worse. You're causing yourself to be disabled. And so even things like smoking can be used against you. So yeah, drugs and alcohol, cigarettes, vaping, marijuana, marijuana is one of those unique things. And we could probably do a whole nother podcast just about how Social Security looks at marijuana. But just because it's legal in not most states, but it's legal. I don't know how many states now. Maybe it's in the majority of states. I haven't looked in a while, but but at a federal level, it's still not legal.
Yeah. And I think it kind of ties back to what we were saying in bullet point 1, the medical treatment and compliance with medical treatment. When your doctors are telling you, hey, for your asthma, your COPD, you need to stop smoking, it's going to show up in the medical records if you're continuing to smoke or any other form of treatment. And when we say about cannabis, I do think that my experience is there are a lot of judges who are behind the times, and there are some very exotic, if you read the medical headlines, exotic treatments for mental health. Some people are considering psilocybin, psychoactive mushrooms as part of a treatment. I'm sure there will be judges who will be freaked out at that prospect because they may have their own sense of what's appropriate treatment. I'd say with cannabis, and I would love to do a deep dive into it, is like there's a difference between using cannabis recreationally. There's a difference between that and when the cannabis is prescribed by a treatment provider. So that is a factor.
100% agreed. And I think it's very important for our audience to know is that you should have a skilled representative and or an attorney make these arguments for you in front of a judge, because if, like you said, many of the judges are behind the times. And so often we talk about, going in front of a judge and there's an opening statement. And in that opening, you can, your lawyer can address, here's the law, here's the rules, here's the treatment, here's the doctor, here's how it helps, right? And then elicit that testimony from you in a hearing to sort of cover your basis in case a judge does deny it. You cover your basis for appeal. So it's a great point. It's a very great point because there are so many, in my opinion, great uses of medicinal marijuana for things, maybe it would be a better alternative in using marijuana versus let's get everyone on opioids, right? We've seen how that's worked out for our country, right? So, and if that helps relieve a person's pain, that's the frustration I get. I've seen a judge argue there's been no scientific evidence that marijuana can be linked to pain reduction. and you can turn in article after article to this judge. He just won't accept it because he's just locked in his words, you know.
Right.
But like you said, we could deep dive into marijuana, and maybe get a doctor and have them talk about it, because, as a lawyer, I'm probably not the right person to talk about it. But what is the number 4 thing that you're sort of seeing in that ways claimants kind of can misstep on their case?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about this, but sometimes, in Social Security case, what you don't know can hurt you. So work-like activities that you do that doesn't necessarily pay you. This could be anything from providing childcare, being in education, meaning like a full-time university student, or even volunteering. These are all things that Social Security consider part of your day-to-day activities, your activities of daily living that could indicate that you have the capacity to do work-like activity that suggests you are not disabled. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And what you've told clients when they tell you, "Hey, I'm the primary caregiver for one or more children. I'm a full-time student, or I regularly volunteer at a local organization that's near and dear to my heart."
Yeah, no, it's great question. With childcare, there's many judges, it's a bit tough because it feels like they're using it against you to take care of your own children. And I think let's address each one individually. I think with childcare in particular, the younger the children you have that you're caring for, the more the judge may use that against you. So if you have like a newborn baby who weighs, maybe not a newborn, but let's say, not almost a toddler age, let's call it 2 years old, weighs 20 pounds. Okay. But you're testifying you can only lift 10, the judge is going to, well, how do you lift your baby? Right? Or if your baby's 15 pounds and you have to lift him and you testify you can only lift 5, right? And that's one of the questions the judge will ask. How do you take care of your baby? How do you feed him? And they just really hammer you on taking care of your children. And what I tell clients is, be prepared for this to come. It's going to feel unfair. It's going to feel, it may trigger a parent to be like, gosh, how are you going to use taking care of my children against me for my disability case? So as long as you know it's coming and you can be prepared for it, one of the things we talk about is, well, let's just describe what it actually looks like. Yeah, like I'll lift my baby just out of the crib and onto the floor, and my back is in severe pain, right? Or my neck or whatever it may be. Or if you do get help, you got to testify to that. Oh, my brother or my sister or my mother or a family member comes over to help me. They're there every day because I can't take care of my baby on my own, right? When the baby sleeps, I sleep. I lay down, and, especially in physical cases, right? And so, or if you're putting your child into childcare, you really need to talk because they're looking at childcare of your own children like a full-time job. And in a lot of ways, it is, right? Because there's a job out there that's called childcare. And if you're the sole childcare provider, you need to be able to explain how you are, especially if it's a physical case and or even a mental case, you need to be able to explain how you're able to do that full time if you're a single parent, or even if you're a coupled parent and your significant other is leaving the house every day for work. So be prepared for that question, right? And again, what you talk about is all the things you do to accommodate yourself to even be able to do it, right? All the things. So a lot of times we have people who have older kids, like maybe a 9-year-old who helps take care of the 1-year-old or the 2-year-old. A lot of time this day and age too, you talk about screens and iPads. I mean, a lot of folks of our clients, their kids are just like, hey, I just have to give them the iPad for most of the day when I'm with them because I'm in so much pain or I'm debilitated throughout the day. And so childcare is tricky, right? But you got to tell the truth. But you got to remember to bring up everything that you may not think about that you're helping accommodate yourself to get through the day, right? And that's the pitfall where a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't even think to say that. As far as education goes, are you in school full time? Because if you're in school full time and you're getting straight A's, it is looked at as like full time work that you're being really successful at. Now, if you're in school part time, it's looked at as a part time work. So they're going to ask how many hours of school are you taking a week, like classes, and then I've seen judges do like if you're in 1 hour of class, they'll do plus 2 hours a day, because it's 3 hours. Plus 2 hours on top of that class in consideration because that's how much homework you need to get time you need to do homework or preparation or what reading or whatever. Right. So if you're like, oh, I'm only taking 5 hours of classes a week, they'll look at it as much more. So the other part is, are you getting special accommodations for those classes? And if you are, make sure you're checking in with your disability services folks at your university or college or wherever you're going to school so they can, we can order records to prove that you're getting special accommodations, like maybe longer time on tests. Maybe you're allowed to miss classes. As you know, there's a rule if you miss 2 or more days of work per month, if we can prove that you're likely to miss 2 or more days of work per month, you'll be found disabled. Well, if you're missing class, a couple times a month, and that's documented, you should order those records and get them turned in. And the big thing is got to make sure it's documented. And then what was the third thing you said? You said childcare.
The third one, yeah. Volunteering is a question that I get. And I see Social Security does consider that as well. My own end is this, I would say to folks, again, is that we're not in the business of creating disabled folks. And we do encourage that folks live as full a life as possible. To that may be volunteering for a cause that's near and dear to your heart. What I suggest is if possible, getting your volunteer coordinator or supervisor to write a letter on your behalf. They may be encouraged to talk about how wonderful you are, but they should also know that what's helpful in a disability case is to talk about limitations and accommodations that this claimant / volunteer experiences. So perhaps there are duties that the organization for sure does not ask the claimant to do. If the claimant needs to miss certain days that they had previously signed up for to volunteer because their health got in the way on that day, we want to make sure that the volunteer organization notes that in their letter to Social Security and say, well, this is an accommodation. We very much appreciate Mr. Claimant or Ms. Claimant's time, but there will be days that we know they may unexpectedly not be able to volunteer for a shift that they had previously said they intend to show up for. So all of those things, and again about the hours worked as well as a volunteer, that is an important factor. Just the same way the number of credits that you take if you were to try to be a college student and have despite your disability. These are all things that we would want documented. Ideally, I would say from your volunteer organizer or supervisor in a letter to Social Security?
Yeah, I'd say volunteer work is looked at like work, right? So if you're volunteering 40 hours a week, judge is going to say, or Social Security is going to say, hey, look, go get a job that pays you for those 40 hours. I think the number one thing I say kind of about all of this is that Social Security wants to make sure that the way you're living your life is consistent with all the reasons you say you can't work. So if you say, hey, look, I can't leave my house because I have my PTSD and my anxiety is so severe, I can't leave my house. But then you're leaving your house even for 2 to 3 hours a week to go volunteer, that's going to raise an eyebrow, right? If you say, I can't lift more than 1 pound, and yet you have a 10-pound baby and you're required to lift that baby, of course, right? The judge is going to ask you about it. So just make sure that the way you live your life is consistent with all the reasons you're telling Social Security you can't work, or reevaluate all the reasons, and that probably leads to the next topic, which is our number, I think at this time, number 5 reason, which is, and I'll let you answer it.
Yeah.